people used to wake up and look forward to a hard day's work and a good, honest wage.
That's our vision. That's why we're not going backwards. That's why we're going forward.
I think it's time to have somebody who says what he means and means what he says. And if I'm president, that's the kind of president I'll be.
Your strategy previously has been one that has been all over the map.
Well, of course, I don't concur with what the president said about my own record and the things that I've said.
I'm going to make sure that we tell the truth to Barack Obama and get him out of the White House.
I am fired up, and I'm ready to go. But I need you. Only you can keep this country moving forward.
Good evening. Dan Rather reporting tonight from Washington, D.C. It's been a very special day all across these United States. One of this country's most sacred tenets is the right to freely elect our government representatives. Tonight, whom you have chosen. Welcome to Election Night 2012. And the polls have already closed in Kentucky and parts of Indiana, both places Mitt Romney expected to do well. More about that in a moment. We have a very special program lined up for you tonight. It will be unlike any election night you've ever seen on television. More about that in a moment too, but first, you're looking at a very long line of voters in Columbus, Ohio. This is the Ohio Union, the student center at Ohio State University. From all across this critical swing state, there are reports of very heavy turnout. There have been problems in Ohio in recent elections, and this year, more controversy over early voting in the state. Many thousands of Ohioans took advantage of casting their ballot before Election Day. This one in Ohio could be for all the marbles, and we're watching Ohio, well, like a hawk on a rabbit. But the big goal tonight is to give you something you've never seen in television election coverage, a one-of-a-kind political insider's view to the results in real time. As we speak, Democratic and Republican political operatives across the country are busy poring over data, making phone calls to campaign field offices to find out who's winning, who's losing, and why. They are looking county by county in swing states. And long before the networks call the race, these political insiders will have a pretty good idea who's likely to be our next president. Throughout the evening, we're going to be joined by one of the best at deciphering the numbers, Republican political guru Mike Murphy. He's run major campaigns from Mitt Romney's election as governor of Massachusetts to John McCain's presidential campaign in 2000. And he's brought two seasoned political numbers crunchers with him to help sort through the data, Dr. David Hill and Alan Phillip. They're going to be sitting on set right here at a research desk, what we call the Wizard's Corner, with one of our own producers, Ursula Fahey. Thank you all for joining us. Well, Mike, let's get right to it. Polls have closed in Kentucky and in most of Indiana.
Right.
What do we know? What do we not know?
We're waiting for real returns. Those are both states that are widely and heavily favored to go to Governor Romney. Though it's interesting, 4 years ago, there was a real upset when Indiana went for Barack Obama. So we'll be diving into the returns there to look at what kind of voters have changed over 4 years and what that might tell us going forward. But our real thing here, and we're going to have a lot of fun, Dan, is we're recreating what campaigns do, a data war room. And our idea was, how do we harness the experts you've never seen on TV before, because they're out in Florida, out in Ohio, in all these swing states, people who do this for a living and know these places cold. So what we have over here at our analytics desk is Dr. David Hill, formerly ran the famous Texas poll for the Texas newspapers. He's a well-known Republican pollster. And with him, Alan Phillip, who's run state parties, who's worked for two governors, both in Florida and Colorado, and is an expert on early voting and precinct turnout and a great precinct number cruncher. But our secret weapon, Ursula, is connected to our real weapon tonight, our little black book of the cell phone numbers of some of the top political operatives in all these states. And we're going to be calling them because now the election's over. It's about math. It's not about spin. On a bipartisan basis, to get their take on where it's going in those key counties and those key states, starting in about an hour when we get Virginia and Florida closing, which are two mega states that could make or break the campaign.
I've had this feeling for some time, Mike, that it may all depend on Virginia, which is to say, if Romney can win Virginia, he's got a shot. If he loses it, Probably not. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, I think if he wins Virginia, which has really been a tied deal, he has a certain amount of momentum. And how those counties come back, and we're tracking the counties, it will tell us a little bit about how the night might unfold demographically. On the other hand, if he loses Virginia, doesn't pick up those critical electoral votes, there's a path forward for Mitt Romney, but it involves some pretty tough states later on. So I can tell you the Romney campaign will feel very good if they get a Virginia win, particularly one with a little bit of comfort in the numbers, because that could project into Ohio, or their dream, the big upset that could change everything tonight, Pennsylvania.
Well, let's talk about Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Voted for Obama the last time. Through
Right.
most of the campaign, expected to go for Obama. The Romney people at least have been talking game that they're closing on Obama in Pennsylvania. True or untrue? If Mitt Romney should upset in Pennsylvania, does that throw all of the electoral college math we've been reading, talking about all these weeks, pretty much out the window?
Yeah, well, Pennsylvania would be a huge touchdown. 20 electoral votes, bigger than Ohio. It's like in a poker game, bang, 4 aces. But if we can go to my little gadget here, I'm going to show you a little quick history on Pennsylvania on why it's a bit of an uphill battle. Now, we should be able to cut to this with our magic controller. I'm going to check the monitor. We're using our high technology here. 3, 2, 1, Shazam. So I'm going to tell you about it in another way. Who needs this high-tech stuff? We got the information here.
Well, you know the old saying that to err is to human, but to really foul up, you need a computer
Yeah, we need
and
a
an
computer.
iPad.
And but here's the bottom line of Pennsylvania. In 2008, President Obama got 54% of the vote, beating John McCain by 10%, a few points better than his national average. So in 2004, President Bush, in a year he won, still lost by about a little more than 2 points to John Kerry. So if you go back through the history of Pennsylvania, it's not an easy Republican state in a presidential year. That said, Republicans just won a governorship there in 2010. So it's within the range of possibility if everything goes right for Romney, and it would be a home run for him. Still, the polling, it's closed, still a few points behind. We got probably the best Democratic political operative who knows that eastern Pennsylvania, those Phyllis suburbs better than anybody, Neil Oxman. We're going to be talking to him a little later. Right. And Mike Udome and Chris Mottola, who are great Republicans. So we're going to deep dive into Pennsylvania when it gets interesting.
One of the things we want to do tonight is take the viewers, take them behind the scenes. Now, exit polls have been run all day long.
Yes.
The bigger networks are reporting on basis of exit polls here and there. Now, why can't the public at large know the details of the exit polling at this hour when it doesn't? And what do we know we can tell the public?
Well, that's an excellent question, because we've had so much discussion of polling this year, and now we have the special kind of polling of exit polling. So Dr. David Hill, our noted pollster, I think can help us go through what we call exit polling 101, and we got some graphics to help. David, how does exit polling work? Who gets polled? A lot of people come up to me and say, Mike, I read all about these polls, these exit polls. Nobody's ever polled me. So how is it done? What's the science of exit polling?
Some special things are happening this year. One is we used to exit polls in all 50 states, but this year, to allow bigger samples in some of the key states, they've reduced the number of states in which exit polls are done to 31. And in each of those 31 states, they're going to do pick about 350 precincts at random across the state. Then someone will stand at each one of those precincts a certain number of feet away from the polls, and as people leave the polls, they try to, what we could say, intercept them and do an interview with them on the spot. This is one potential problem of these, is that some of the research in the past has shown that Republicans are less willing to stop and be interviewed, and so sometimes this has caused some skew in the results.
Has there ever been gunfire in Texas or anything?
No, I don't think so.
Ornery Republican? So
no.
we sample all these people. You can see them in yellow on the deal here. Those are the states they're going to do. But what happens if I vote by, like I live in California, I vote by absentee ballot, so I'm not going to get intercepted.
Okay, again, everything's changing, so they're having to do some new sampling by telephone, where they're using both landline phones and cell phones to call approximately 30% of the sample, of the total sample of the 12,000 that you see there that might be interviewed nationwide, on the phone, asking them how they voted when they voted either absentee or early in those states that do have that.
And that all goes into a computer. Do they do the interceptions at these targeted polling places in the morning or at night or all during the day? How does
They try to do them all through the day. There's a very interesting paper published a couple years ago called Chronopolitics. Certain kinds of voters like to vote early in the morning.
Excuse me, what kind of politics?
Chronopolitics.
Never heard of it.
Sounds like
your voting habits are sort of like a lot of other things. You pick a time of day in which you like to vote. So we couldn't do all the voting in the morning because, I mean, all the interviewing in the morning because there might be people that like to vote after work on their way home.
Well,
So-
if I may here, Mike.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
We're now, the exit polling is continuing it as the clock moves across the Midwest and to the West, but a lot of exit polling has been completed. Now, the people who have done the exit polling, people who have paid for the exit polling, the political pals behind the scenes, they pretty much know what those early exit polls have said.
That's a great point.
Now, so what I'm hearing in the last 45 minutes, I put this in the category, this information is about as useless as a pulled tooth. But what I'm hearing is one guy says to another guy, I'm looking at the exit polling information, and so far, very early on, Obama is doing okay where he has to. Should we make anything of that at all?
No, I wouldn't. I think here's what happens. It's a great Washington thing. All these rumors of exit polls are going around. Some Republican just emailed me that, oh, there's a surge. Romney's up 48 in Ohio. You know, and the truth is, it's a half-baked omelet, which has a huge margin of error to begin with. Right. These things have been wrong. So what the networks do is they do all this sampling, but then they do what we're doing. And we're getting some of the exit polls, and we've subscribed to it. But they go out and look at key precincts and look for real numbers that come in, and they combine that with the exit polls, and then they make a projection later. The amount of nervous people on each side clamoring for some kind of exit rumor right now is hilarious, but nobody knows yet. It's way too early. Later, when we get some real numbers in, and we talk to some of our people in the field who've been in these counties, we're starting to really know what's going on. And while we don't have the resources to call an election, we've invented the PDS, Pretty Darn Sure, award we're going to be given when we think it's really running in one direction.
Thanks, Mike. Now, early Kentucky returns. These are very early returns. And keep in mind, folks, one of a reporter's creed is the first things you hear are often wrong. So it is in politics. Just because we put up some numbers and percentages. Now, this is in Kentucky. Remember, this state was written off a long time ago. This is Mitt Romney country. He's going to carry this state. This is what the percentages are on the basis of what very few precincts reporting, almost no complete precincts reporting. So this information shouldn't be taken as an indication that, oh, Mitt Romney's off to a great start, Obama's off to a bad start. We put it up just to give you an idea that we're keeping pace as time goes along in this. And Mike, I want to ask you.
Yeah.
I've said it's true of reporters. You're careful. The first things you hear are often wrong. You've been in the inside in top campaigns. Do you say that to yourself inside, or you say, ooh, well, we see a surge?
Your brain's thinking one thing, but then you get the crazy email about some exit rumor, and you think, God, could it be true? Could it be true? I'm a Republican. I'm a Romney supporter, but you know, when it comes to counting votes, I'm bipartisan. My pal David Axelrod emailed me an hour ago. What have you heard? I said, I haven't heard anything. What have you heard? Because nobody has anything to do on election day other than get worried, and if they were smart, drink, because it's kind of the airplane's landing here. I mean, the people in the mechanical side in the precincts are what we call flushing voters. Right. They got lists, and they're pushing people to make sure they vote in the afternoon wave, which we haven't exit polled yet. I would say this, the way the campaigns do it, and the way we're going to do it tonight, is they keep a big database of past history by county and precinct. Right. And in fact, this thing might be working now. I think I've got a signal here. And so what that shows them is what people have done in those places before. So then, with a lot of work in demography, they calculate target numbers. So they say, all right, we're in Tuscarora or Tuscarora County, Ohio, which tends to be a pretty good bellwether. We better come out of there with 400 votes.
I got you.
And
Mike,
then they count.
We need to take a break here. Besides Mike and his team, we have a long list of distinguished guests here with us tonight who will be joining us throughout the evening. Up next, we're going to make a quick detour out to Hollywood, yes, to Hollywood, for a conversation with a man who's never afraid to express his opinion, even if he knows very well it will, if not insult some people, certainly make the hair on the back of the neck raise. Rabble-rouser Bill Maher will be joining us live, so stick in here with us. Right now, a word about our hosts. We're broadcasting tonight in front of an audience from the night studio at the museum in Washington, D.C. This wonderful interactive museum on Pennsylvania Avenue, just down the street from the Capitol, is dedicated to raising public awareness of the important role of a free press in a democratic society. So this is from where we're broadcasting. We'll be back in just a moment.
and mystified.
Yes, this is Dan Rather in Washington saying hello to my friend Bill Maher in Hollywood.
Dan?
How are you doing, Doctor?
Hi, Dan. How you doing?
Good. Thank you very much for doing this, Bill.
Sure, of course.
Is this supposed to be funny? He was like, now that's when you know.
Now, we don't have anything closing at 6:30, do we?
No. Basically, 7 o'clock is when it kind of starts with the Virginia, Florida, and then 7:30 Ohio.
Right.
It's sort of adult when they're doing the thing.
I understand. Oh, I got it. Welcome back to the Museum and Election Night 2012. We're venturing outside the Beltway now for a conversation with a man who always has a lot to say about this presidential election. Bill Maher is the host of Real Time with Bill Maher on HBO, and he graciously joins us from Los Angeles. Welcome, Bill. Let's talk politics. What have we not heard from the candidates on either side in this campaign that we should have heard?
Well, I guess in light of the storm last week, the number one issue on my list would be global warming. But there's a host of them. You know, there's always a conspiracy among the two parties. This was Ralph Nader's point back in 2000, that they're really two parts of the same party. You don't hear a lot about gun control. They seem to agree on civil liberties, that they don't matter anymore in light of our so-called war on terror. So there's a lot of reasons why we should have alternative parties, but of course that's probably not in the offing. And a lot of us learned our lesson in 2000, Dan. If you only get two parties, you might as well vote for the one that's not representing the mental patients, and that would be the Democratic Party.
Well, what do you say to someone out there? What do you say to someone out there who says, listen, there really is no difference, not only in the two parties, there's no real difference in the two candidates. You agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that. There's a difference. It's just that it's not big enough, and on many issues, the Democrats do not represent someone like myself and tens of millions of other Americans. But it is important to remember that on Election Day, when you only have two candidates, there is a giant difference. Obviously, Mitt Romney is still peddling what the Republicans have peddled for 30 years, which is trickle-down economics, which has proven not to work, and yet they keep somehow selling it, and who knows, he could win. I don't think he will, but it's possible. So, I mean, that's just economics. On a number of other issues, at least Obama believes in global warming. At least he doesn't say it's a hoax, like everyone in the United States Senate on the Republican side does. And he's just a more capable manager. Put ideology aside, Mitt Romney has just been wrong on too many things. He was wrong on not going into Pakistan to get bin Laden. He was wrong on bailing out the auto industry. He was wrong on saying FEMA should be privatized. I remember when just being wrong about stuff mattered.
Well, let's talk about legislative accomplishments, foreign policy accomplishments. What do you consider to be President Obama's biggest accomplishments? You know, coming behind that, I'm going to ask you what his major failures have been.
Well, obviously, passing health care is something so many presidents have tried to do. It was not the perfect bill. Again, Democrats can be disappointing for progressives, but it was a start. And it was a major achievement to finally join all the other modern countries in attempting to bring health care to all of our citizens. And obviously, the stimulus bill, which stopped a depression. I mean, almost every economist agrees that we were on the precipice and we could have gone into a depression, and we didn't. And somehow the conventional wisdom there is, well, you can't run on it could have been worse. Why? Really, America is that dumb that we can't understand the concept of it could have been worse? Like, I'll give you an example. Remember Captain Sullenberger who landed the plane on the Hudson River?
Sure.
I think that could have been worse, Dan. I do. Was it the ideal way to have your commercial flight end? No, but everyone dying in a fiery ball, I would say, could have been worse. So obviously, this man who is our president is not perfect, but when you look at those accomplishments, starting the regulation on Wall Street, getting bin Laden, the auto industry, you know, we know the list. It's actually rather impressive.
And on the failure side, nobody can go through a 4-year presidency and not have their failures. In your opinion, President Obama's biggest failures?
Well, the biggest failures were those things I mentioned that he did not mention. I didn't think he went far enough on global warming, although there actually was a lot in the stimulus package that prodded green energy. You know, I certainly didn't agree, as many progressives didn't, about staying in Afghanistan and doubling down on that war. That was, I think, a terrible mistake. We did not really need to surge there. It was never going to go our way, and we just should have gotten out. Civil liberties, you know, he's been a big disappointment. I mean, he's basically continued the Bush strategies. But, you know, where he has failed, I sort of understand why he has failed. He had a lot on his plate coming in. And beyond that, you know, he is functioning in a very hostile environment, not just for liberals, but just for anybody in this hyper-partisan world we live in now. He had to face a filibuster that other presidents didn't have to deal with. The filibuster was something used rarely. Now it's any piece of legislation you don't like needs a 60-vote majority in the Senate. Well, that's a rewriting of the Constitution. So he was presiding over a Constitution that other presidents didn't have to.
Well, Bill, you've made it very clear, explicitly clear, that you don't think Mitt Romney should be elected. Let me go on record as saying at this hour, he's got a chance to be elected president. Have you seen anything in Mitt Romney, the candidate, set apart from what his party stands for the moment, Mitt Romney, the candidate, that you like?
No. No, Dan, I really don't. I mean, you know, I guess he's a nice guy when you get him away from politics, but who knows what he believes? I mean, and that's not just me saying this. I mean, the Salt Lake City Tribune, the paper of Salt Lake City, Utah, said that this man was such a flip-flopper, was so all over the map that we have no idea what he would do. We don't know what he stands for. I mean, when the people who know you best don't like you, they don't like him in Massachusetts. He's losing that race where he was governor by about 25, 30 points. They don't like him in Michigan. And if the Salt Lake City paper doesn't like him, I think that really says something about the man. But again, we don't know who this man is. We've never had a president, or rather a candidate, who ran like this. I mean, they've all pivoted to a degree. But this guy just seems to operate as if what he said 30 days ago means nothing and didn't exist. I mean, he spent 16 months running as more conservative than Rick Santorum and 30 days running as more liberal than Barack Obama. Who knows who this guy is?
Well, Bill, given what you've said on this program and said throughout the campaign, should Mitt Romney win the presidency when all is said and done, are you going to be looking to take up exile in, say, Tahiti or Canada, or you think that's going to be necessary?
No, first of all, I would never do that. It's my country, too. I'll fight for it. And Mitt Romney has a wonderful plan for the economy, which is to take credit for the turnaround that is already underway and will continue when he becomes president. Yes, he has a plan for 12 million jobs to sit there and let it happen, a lot of which has to do with what happened in the last 3 or 4 years. With no help from the Republicans, of course. They blocked all public sector help that would have been a good prod for the economy. That's certainly what Bush did. A lot of Bush's jobs were from creating the Department of Homeland Security, fighting 2 wars. He wasn't shy about creating public sector jobs, you know, the party that hates government. Reagan also. Obama's the only one who has had to do it completely in the private sector. Most of his job loss has been in the public sector.
Well, Bill, you acknowledged on your program recently, I'm quoting here, that despite the advertisements, the lying, as you call it, insulting our intelligence, that you're sad to see this election end. Why? A lot of the rest of us are saying, phew, finally it's over.
Well, it's what I do for a living, Dan. This is my busy season. It's our inventory season over here at Real Time. And I mean, I'm sad to see it go because I'm a political junkie and they're taking my drug away. And next year will not nearly be as exciting. There won't be debates and there won't be conventions and there won't be this giant mono finale. I mean, it is tawdry, but it's not dull. And for those of us who love the spectator sport of it, I imagine you might be in that category yourself.
I acknowledge that.
Yeah, it is a bit of a letdown when the election is over.
True. Well, we have only a few seconds left here, but what's the single funniest thing that's happened in the campaign?
Trump's hair.
Bill Maher, thank you very much for being with us. Thanks a lot.
Always a
Bill.
pleasure, Dan.
Appreciate it, my friend. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, up next, we get right back to the numbers. Keep in mind the polls have closed in Kentucky. They've closed in most places in Indiana, both those states likely to be strong for Romney. Mike Murphy and his team are burning up the phone lines to find out what's happening in the key battleground states tonight, beginning with Virginia. Plus, we'll be joined by a rising star in American politics, Atlanta Mayor Kasim Reed, and our old friend journalist Matt Cooper. So stay with us live from the museum in Washington, D.C. Welcome back. If you haven't voted yet, the polls are still open in most of the states, and I encourage you to exercise your civic rights, so get out there and vote and come back and watch us for the rest of the evening. For those of you who have already cast your ballots, we know there is no shortage of opinions for following election returns tonight on television, online. We hope that you will find this coverage an oasis of thoughtfulness and reason. We'll be lucky if we can do that, but we're trying. Election nights are exciting, and for those committed to one side or the other, fraught with nervous energy, particularly along about this time. But ultimately, it's about what will happen over the next 4 years. And we're going to have top-notch guests on all night to help sort through the campaign that was and the country that will be. We're honored to kick off that part of our coverage with Atlanta's Democratic Mayor, Kasim Reed, and our old friend, Matt Cooper, the editor of National Journal Daily and a longtime political reporter. Matt was covering politics before I think Matt Tebow was even born. Mayor Reed, let's start with you. That you have a lot of friends in the president's campaign. What do you hear? What do you know?
Everybody feels good right now. Right now what I'm hearing is not too high, not too low. They feel that the performance is consistent. The areas of concern are in North Carolina, and that information is about 1 minute old.
North Carolina. I've seen a lot of maps that say it's going Romney this time. It went for Obama the last time. It's going Romney this time. You're not convinced that's the case?
I don't think it's done. But in terms of all of the models that we've worked on over the last week, as of a minute or 2 minutes ago, we think that our models are holding, with the exception of North Carolina is the most problematic. So we're encouraging folks to vote, and there's a big push right now around North Carolina. Everything else feels pretty good.
Well, in your own mind, what are you worried about? What area, besides North Carolina, what are you most worried about?
I'm worried about the lines in Florida. I was in Florida this weekend. I was in Miami Gardens. We need a massive turnout in Miami Gardens. They've got a 10-page ballot in Florida. So really we have a very basic message. We need everybody to stay in line. Florida has a Republican leader who has not been extending the hours. He's been holding firm, which is his right. We disagree with that, obviously. But the lines in Florida right now are massive, and in an election that we believe is going to be very close, we're just encouraging everybody to stand in line. But I saw that over the weekend when I was campaigning in Miami Gardens in different parts of Florida. I've been to Florida now 5 times. So if you ask me what concerns me, that concerns me.
Now, hypothetically, we're not at this point, hypothetically, sure. If Governor Romney turns out to carry Florida, Virginia, and North Carolina, true or untrue, that President Obama would have to depend on a so-called firewall of Wisconsin, Ohio, and Iowa?
I think that's untrue, and let me share why. We feel excellent about Iowa, and we feel excellent about Nevada. So we think Nevada is ours, and even my Republican friends acknowledge that Nevada's in good shape. I think Senator Harry Reid's organization is going to deliver Nevada. So that gives us the opportunity to have Nevada, Colorado, which we feel real good about. Senator Udall was talking today about how he thinks Colorado's go. We've got a great governor, and Governor Hickenlooper in Colorado. So we see a path that's built around Nevada, Colorado, Iowa, New Hampshire, and Holden, Wisconsin.
Well, interesting, you don't feel that you have to have Wisconsin, Ohio, and Iowa. Very interesting. Matt Cooper, let me turn to you. What do you know? What do you hear?
Well, as Mike was saying earlier, it's a sea of rumors all day. And I think building on what the mayor said, one of the things to watch is this question of extended hours. People who don't, they're online when the polls are closing. Are they going to get to vote? Are there going to be trip-ups at the box? I voted this afternoon in a very sedentary precinct in Washington, D.C. And even there, I went at 3 in the afternoon to avoid the crowds. It was still an hour. There was confusion about which line. So I think that's one thing to watch tonight.
What's in your head? I said earlier, Virginia very much in mind. I think that President Obama carries Virginia. He's likely to win. If he loses Virginia, not so likely. But where are you watching?
I guess a couple of things. One is this whole question of how accurate are the polls this time out? Is there legitimacy to the Republican complaint? And I'd be curious what Mike thinks about this. That the modeling has not been good this year. The sampling is wrong. It's underestimating potential Romney voters. That's one thing I'm interested in. And then I'm very interested in these kind of affluent suburbs where President Obama has really needed to, has had good numbers in the past, needs to keep them up.
Well, Mike, when we talk about the poll models possibly being wrong, after all, no aggregator of polls, such as Nate Silver of the New York Times and Name One, is any better than the models on which the polls he's aggregating are built. But there's a lot of talk, particularly among the Republicans, justifiably so, saying we think the models are wrong because it leaves out some of our people. But true or untrue, that these models also run the risk of leaving out people at the very low end of the economic scale, people who don't have cell phones, maybe not even have a regular telephone.
Well, the new election sport is for each side to quibble about the other side's polling. Polls now are used, I think, in the media a lot as a horse race thing of the day. You know, it's sports. Which team is 1 point ahead behind the buzzer? People forget all these 1-point polls. The margin of error is 3 points on each number. And then you have websites now where people are reweighting polls to make them more like they like. So generally, when the poll is good for Democrats, Democrats think it's an excellent poll. When the poll is good for Republicans, Republicans think they've never seen a finer bit of statistical analysis. The truth is, as David Hill, who's a pollster, will tell you, is there's a margin of error. And the hardest thing in polling now in our busy society is getting a good sample. Because what the media want, and most of the polls we read about are media polls. You don't hear about the internal polls, which tend to be pretty good because people make big decisions with them. The media polls, the publishers want them cheap and fast because they're covering sports, the nightly poll. Good polls are expensive and slow because you have to get what are called quotas. You have to get people who are hard to get on the phone. And when you don't get those people on the phone because you've rushed it or you're too cheap to spend the money to keep the phone working, you can get a little tilt. And then there's a whole school of how do you create a likely voter screen. Now, again, David Hill's the expert, but generally in a presidential year, and I think you'd agree, Dr. Hill, you don't want to do too much likely voter screening because generally a lot of people vote.
Well, last election was certainly a historically high turnout, and the big question is going to be, will that huge turnout come back again? A lot of the polls' models were based on a 2008 model. Some people want to go back to 2004 or even 2000 to try to do their own model. Probably the best course is some average of those. But that's going to be a key factor in how these polls turn out this time, the accuracy.
Let me, Mr. Mayor, turn back to you. What did you not hear discussed in the campaign that you think should have been discussed in the campaign?
I think we should have had much more direct and specific conversations on the plans for job creation. I mean, I'll give you a specific example. Right now in the United States, we've got about 3 million job vacancies that we're not filling because we don't have folks that are qualified to fill those jobs. I would have liked that to have been a huge part of the election because when you have a job opening and you've got a country that doesn't have the workforce that's trained up to fill those vacancies, and you have to get people frequently who are not from the U.S. to fill them, it seems to me to be a major opportunity when the focus, the central theme that people care about is being employed. So I think we should have had a much bigger conversation about how to fill those positions because it goes to who we are, it goes to our national competitiveness, and it goes to changing real people's lives. If you can go into Iowa or if you can go into Atlanta or New York and train a person for a position that is currently vacant but incapable of being filled, that strikes me as real change in people's lives. Neither candidate during the course of the election talked about that very much.
I didn't hear either candidate, I didn't hear every word each candidate said.
Sure.
Discuss the fact, and it is a fact, that when we talk about high unemployment has come down some, but it's still high.
Sure.
That is astronomically high, particularly among young men of African American heritage.
Yes.
Why was that not the case? Why wasn't that discussed?
Well, in all honesty, Mr. Rather, that's a tough conversation to have. First, what we know as black people is that our unemployment numbers are always higher. Even during the best times when President Clinton was president, we typically are about 1/3 to 1/2 point higher than the overall number. The other problem is we also know that the country's first black president having a targeted conversation that's focused on black people would have risked damaging him by alienating large parts of the voting population. Black people understand that. We're sophisticated enough to get it. But what we do believe and what we do know is that the programs that this president advanced really did fundamentally improve the lives of black people. And we know that as the overall unemployment number comes down, so will the unemployment number in the black community.
Let me turn, Ann, what did you not hear in the campaign that you're disappointed they didn't discuss?
Well, I think some of the things Bill Maher mentioned, actually, things like the drug war, I think, it's worth re-examining. You know, I think also there probably weren't as many specific discussions about how to get the deficit under control. Both candidates talk a lot about it, but you know, we all know it's going to take some heavy lifting with entitlement programs. And if you want to do that, how are you going to do it? And that wasn't really fleshed out very much. That said, though, I think it was actually a pretty good campaign. And,
Do you? You're one of the few people I know who think it was a good campaign.
I don't mean good in the sense that it was polite or courteous, but I do think a basic kind of sense of information about voters, about where the men stand on issues, their overall direction was imparted to voters.
Well, Mike?
Well, I'd say as of right now, I think I've changed my mind. I think there was too much Bill Maher. But I have to put on my partisan Republican hat for 1 minute.
Speak to the executive producer.
Small. It was a small campaign. And if the president loses, it'll because he ran an effective negative campaign. Excuse me, the president wins. It'll be because he ran an effective negative campaign about Mitt Romney, but he got no mandate for anything else. But I want to take it back to politics for a sec, if I can, Dan, because I got the mayor of Atlanta here, so a very effective politician.
I'm always glad to be with you, Mike.
Fulton County.
Yes.
A tremendous Obama campaign in 2008. You guys, by my rough calculation, give or take 500 votes, came out of Fulton County, 142,000 votes.
Now, we're talking about Fulton County?
In Georgia.
Atlanta. Right in Central, where we're talking to a guy who knows it best.
Yes.
You're going to beat the number 142, you're going to come under. What do you think?
We're going to beat it easily.
Okay.
In fact, that's why I think that there's no question that the lack of black enthusiasm or African American enthusiasm was wrong. The historic number that we had in 2008, Mike, was 30%. It's about the African American population. We hit 30% of the turnout, 29.2, 29.5. Yeah. We're projected to hit 33%.
Yeah.
So that means that in a state where we all know that Mitt Romney is going to win, I voted today. I was in line at 10 a.m. for more than an hour at that time, which is, that's not even a rush hour. We think we'll hit 33%. So in 2012, with no money, no organization, and no chance of winning the state, you're having record turnout among the black community.
Yeah, I got it up there on the screen. As you can see, in 2008, 32.1 for McCain. It's a base Democratic county, 67.1 for Obama. So that's that 142 edge. It's a big number to beat, because if you look at the county, and this is something the Obama campaign did well, and you all did well there. Look at 2004. Look at the difference. As you go back in town. So that's when people talk about turning out the base, this is a good example of it. Against Bush-Kerry, we're talking about 65,000 votes. More than doubled in 2008, and I'm sure Chicago will be happy to hear you got that number, because the pressure's on a little bit.
We'll beat that number. We'll beat the 2008 performance comfortably. We'll hit 33%. We'll shatter a record, as I said, in a state where the president hadn't spent a dime. In fact, we've been a donor state.
I'll bet you dinner in your fine city. I think you're going to be a little under.
I'll take that bet.
All right,
as long as I get to pick the restaurant.
You're done.
Listen, we have company policy against wagering on the air. We're headed toward the top of the hour now, and we'll have lots more in just a moment here from Washington, so stick in here with us. Very good. We're back at the museum here in Washington, D.C. for our election night coverage. Now, the early vote, we've just been told 36% of voters cast their ballots before the polls open today. That's about 46 million people. That shatters the previous record of 30% and 40 million early votes in 2008. So we've got a record here of the number of people who voted before the polls actually opened today. Now, according to a number of polls, including the ABC Washington Post poll, the early vote broke down this way. These are new numbers, by the way. Obama, this is in the early vote, 46 million people, 52% for President Obama, 45% for Mitt Romney. 52-45 lead in the early voting for President Obama. Now, that's a 7-point advantage for President Obama. But hold the phone, Molly. In 2008, the president had a significantly bigger lead among early voters. Remember, I told you this time 52-45 Obama over Romney. But in 2008, it was Obama 58, McCain 40. Now, Matt Cooper, what do we make of that? Bad news for the Obama camp? Portent of things to come?
I don't know. I don't think we'd read too much into it. I mean, I think all Republicans have gotten better at working the early vote. It was more of a breakthrough phenomenon back then, and I'm not sure it's really going to mean that much.
Mayor, what do you think?
I don't think it means that much because it doesn't track the battlegrounds. So I think the battlegrounds in the Electoral College are what matter here. I think the high Republican numbers nationally really don't matter. People in Mississippi were delighted to go and vote today. In Alabama, they can go vote all day. But they're not in battlegrounds. And in the battlegrounds, the president is getting the performance that he needs to get. So folks in Mississippi and Alabama, I'm sure they're voting in droves.
Mike Murphy, if you're in the Obama camp and you see this, okay, we got a pretty good lead, 7-point lead in the early voting, but less than we got last time. Yeah. Are their fingernails beginning to sweat a little over this?
Well, they don't like it, but it's been existing for a while. There's been kind of some voodoo going on between the parties about this. Historically, the Democrats have done a good job with early and absentee voting, and in states like Florida, the Republicans win on Election Day. So you see the same trend here. The Democrats are ahead, but the margin has been cut. So it tells us one thing for sure and one thing for maybe. The for sure thing is this isn't going to be a 7-point blowout like 2008. Remember, we're comparing apples to 2008. It's going to be a tighter election, which we already know. Mm-hmm. In Florida, the news is really good. That's why in my betting pool, I've got Romney with a little edge there. In the other places, it says competitive, but it can't tell you outcome. But we do have a little news from Indiana. This is almost a little bit funny. We have more computing and wizard power here than we have results right now. So the guys have gotten a little bored, but if we go to our Indiana slide, I got the hot news from Vigo County, Indiana. In fact, we are ready. Maybe we're beat the networks. We're going to call Indiana. Vigo County is a great bellwether. It's Terre Haute, and it's small. You can put up my other screen here. You can see it down there in the corner. See the little green box? That's Vigo County. And in 2008, 43,884 people voted, and President Obama carried it. And he carried it pretty big, about 7,000 votes, 41, as you can see, to 57. Well, about half the vote is in, and they're popping the champagne in Boston because they're 536 points ahead with half the vote in. Romney at 50%, 48% for the president. But if you put my chart up again, I wanted to show you the time series, why Vigo County counts. It always tends to get it right. If you look on the right there, 41.3 McCain, 57 Obama, 2008. We back it up to 2004. And you can see in that election, President Bush, 52.8, 46.4. And in that real squeaker we had in 2000, almost tied. So Terre Haute, Indiana is a good indicator. Nobody thinks Indiana's a swing state this time. It's no surprise Romney's doing well there. But that county looks a lot more like the 2000 or 2004 election than it does in 2008. Another indication it's going to be closer. I'll finish with a plug. This incredibly great data app is from our pals at Target Point. It's called Electionary, and we'll be using it all night.
Well, you see, this is the kind of thing that the pals, the real people who work in campaigns, whose life depends on whether their candidate wins or loses. Small counties like this. Yeah, I can hear someone in the audience sort of chuckling and say, what is this out-of-the-way county in Indiana? Yeah. But by putting up on the right-hand side the history of how it went in the past, doesn't mean that's the way tonight's election is going to go, But if you're listening for the small sounds out in the jungle, here's one.
It's a good squawk, because what it really says, we got half the vote in, and it could be one part of the county and another. There's some differences, but probably, this is like a poll of 30,000 people, which is a bigger sample than any of these polls we've been fighting over. And nobody's surprised that Chicago expected this, but it shows that it's definitely going to be a closer election.
I have an election night drum roll since we're doing drum rolls. That goes to my point. Folks in Indiana may be energized, Mississippi, and Alabama. They're energized for Romney. That's not new news. So they're voting, and it's going to be a tight race. But the point I'm making is this. In Florida, which we referenced when we were talking about absentee and early voting, historically, if you go to the 2008 numbers, Republicans had 250,000 vote early and absentee vote advantage. So it's actually the reverse in Florida. So it was 250,000 to about 60,000. This election, the Democrats have cut that early absentee vote, which historically went to the Republicans, down to about a 30 to 40 vote margin.
I want to pause here for just a second. Polls have closed in Kentucky, closed in almost all of Indiana, not closed completely in extreme western Indiana, or have they?
You know what? Indiana's so in the bag, I haven't even checked.
But
Alan, what's the closing is?
The western end should be closing in about 9 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, way up there in Elkhart.
But these are two states, Kentucky and Indiana, colored them red. They're going for Mitt Romney. Supposedly, allegedly, reportedly a very close Senate race in Indiana, which we'll be talking about the Senate races as the evening goes along. We don't have enough information to even make a guess on that. If we can put up the graphic, everybody likes to see a graphic from time to time. In Kentucky, they have something like 1 or 2% of the precincts reporting, but as I said, Kentucky it goes to Romney. Indiana goes to Romney. These the states we're watching. These are the swing states. These are the states that will tell us when we begin to get real results in from Florida, Virginia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. And within the next hour, certainly the next hour and a half, we should be seeing some significant numbers. Right now, we're doing basically what everybody else does, and that put up little things like the small county in Indiana, tell you where the votes are and where to watch. But there's not much information to go on at the present time. And anything you hear that says, oh, Romney's off to a great start, Obama's off to a great start, you can just lean back in your rocker and have another adult beverage or something else if you like, because it's going to take a while. It's going to take a while. Now, later on in the evening, I think everybody around this table agrees that they don't speak up. Later on around the evening, you may need the defibrillators, because it's going to be heart attack arrest time along about 9:30 or 10 o'clock, if not before, and it could stretch on through the rest of the evening. At this particular point, Matt, what do you think is the single most important thing the public needs to know?
Well, I'd keep all eyes on Ohio. It's fairly conventional wisdom, but I really think that's still your pivot point here. I think, Florida does, as Mike said, look better for Romney. I think it's still very hard to see Pennsylvania popping loose for Romney. And I think if the president nails down Ohio, he's got it. So that's the thing I'll be watching. And, also watching these big demographic trends. The president's had a lot of problems with blue-collar, non-college degree earning white voters. That's been a very tough segment for him. He's not going to win them anywhere. If he doesn't lose them as badly in Ohio because of the auto bailout and other things, I think he'll get there.
We have some numbers on the Indiana Senate race. Now, remember, Indiana belongs to Romney in this election. He's going to carry Indiana. But in the Senate race, this is a very important race. Keep in mind that Democrats are hoping to hold on to their majority in the United States Senate. Republicans started this campaign year believing they could flip that over. We'll see. But in this race, what makes it particularly interesting is that Richard Lugar, one of the longest serving and most respected senators on either side of the aisle, Republican, was beaten in the primary by Murdoch. And the whole thing in Indiana, okay, the state's going to go for Romney in the presidential race. What happens in the Senate race? This is on the basis of only 1% of the precincts reporting. And as you can see, Murdoch is off to a slight lead. Too early to say what's going to happen in the Indiana Senate race, but we are watching very closely as we're watching other Senate races. As you know, in addition to the presidential race, of course, you have these down ballot things. High expectation the Republicans will hold on to the Congress. Certainly not certain. It'd be in the wee hours of tomorrow morning before we can probably say with any certainty. But the Republicans, high probability they hold on to the House. In the Senate, they have a shot of taking over the Senate. It's been a fading shot in the last weeks of the campaign by most estimates, but who can say? Just to let you know, we're keeping a close eye on those Senate races as well as on the presidential race. Now, we're coming up on the top of the hour. Hello, if you've gone to the refrigerator to get something to drink, time to come back because some key swing states, the polls are about to close in them, including Virginia and Florida. I'll be back with Mike Murphy and company, who'll be taking us behind the numbers, as well as our other election night guests right after this. It's 7 p.m. in the east, and it might be time to tuck the kids in bed because this is the time of night when things can start getting, well, frisky to say the least. First votes are being reported in 3 pivotal swing states: Florida, Virginia, and New Hampshire, as well as Vermont, South Carolina, and Mary Reed's home state of Georgia. Governor Romney really needs these swing states to win. If you see these fall early, this night might have less suspense than a Harlem Globetrotters game, which is to say, if you see these states swinging President Obama's direction, may mean that he's headed to victory. So let's get to our panel. Mike, we're talking about this hour, possibly the hour of decision, with Florida, Virginia, North Carolina, all of the polls closing. If
President Obama can win Florida, which I think Romney has a little edge, but if he can, it's in the margin of error, or President Obama can win Virginia, it's going to be a very long night for Romney. It's not impossible, but the Romney strategy starts. We actually have a chart with this. It might be worth quickly looking at it, the Romney +1 states, which is a good way to kind of go through it. And I'm sorry, Control Room, we're going to hold on that Indiana news there for a second. But it shows you kind of how Romney has to put his pieces together. And the 3 biggest ones, of course, are Florida, Virginia, and Ohio. And if you look at the actual electoral vote numbers here, if you lose Florida, you're looking about, and I don't know if my telestrator's up, I'm seeing the other thing here, but I'm going to guess. There we are. Whoa, look at that. Murphy cannot use, I'm no Madden. I might say I'm doing it blind. There we go. Excellent work. All right, I'm going to defend my reputation here by doing that correctly. Bingo. Whoever wins that, huge advantage. Then we're going to be looking at this, and finally that. And if Romney can't get here or here done, he needs them both, then this problem here becomes part of a much huger problem. He's got to go to Pennsylvania or somewhere hard.
Excuse me, we're talking about Florida, Virginia, and Ohio.
Right.
And by the way, while I'm at, the polls have not closed in North Carolina. I made a mistake early on, put an E by Anchorman. North Carolina, the polls have not closed there. But see what you're talking about. It's Florida, Virginia, and Ohio. Now, question, Mike, and then I'll ask you, Matt Cooper. Can Romney win if he loses all 3 of those states, Florida, Virginia, and Ohio?
It would require the intervention of the U.S. Army. It's just the math doesn't, because see, we call this chart the +1 states for a reason. If Romney wins the big 3, 29 electoral votes in Florida, 13 in Virginia, 18 in Ohio, he still needs 1 more. And the battlefield for the 1 more state to put him over the top is New Hampshire, 4 is enough. Wisconsin, Paul Ryan's home state, close, but Republicans haven't carried that thing since '84. It's always close, but not quite there. Iowa, 6 points, Colorado, 9, or demographically now, even with a 10% unemployment rate, very difficult Nevada. So he's got to get, the best map for him is the 3 dark red states and 1 of the pinker states.
Well,
that's the way.
While we have that map up, if we can put the map back up, I'd appreciate it. But while we have that map up, is here you're talking about the heartwood of the election.
Right.
Florida, Virginia, Ohio, then up, number 10, Wisconsin, Iowa, Colorado, and Nevada.
Right.
Now, of those states, if President Obama were to carry 5 of those 7 states, he's probably going to win the election.
Yeah, if you look at the math, like take a look, if the president can get, let's say he can get Virginia right here, and that all of a sudden is off kind of Romney's map, he's got to make up 13 electoral votes, which means he's got to go win a tough state. He's in the hunt with 10 and then 4 in New Hampshire. He's got to make up 13. And all the makeup states are pretty hard to win a bunch of. Not impossible. And again, you've got the one big question. If Pennsylvania, which isn't even on our map because it hadn't been really interesting in the campaign until 10 days ago, if Pennsylvania goes, I'm moving my circle, sorry, right here, that's 20. That's the blockbuster, but it's really hard. That's why the Romney campaign went there. That's why they're spending money there. That's why the Obama campaign's spending money there. That's the loose bolt on the Obama side.
This brings us to something I want to discuss with the panel. This is as good a time as any. We're talking about these key states because they fit the electoral college map. You could have a situation, I'm not saying we will, we could have a situation tonight where the overall national popular vote goes in one direction and the electoral college goes another. It's happened before in our history. We may talk about this as the evening goes along, but let's at least touch on it. Let me start with you, Matt. Is the electoral college still relevant? Should we be still sticking with it? A lot of talk, listen, why don't we have a straight up and down vote?
Well, a lot of people say that, and I think they've got a lot of legitimate questions about it. Look, it does. You know, you do have situations where a candidate who wins only a minority of the vote becomes president. Also, you know, if you had a national election, you would see the candidates everywhere. Now, you might just see them in L.A. and New York and, you know, where the big population numbers are, and you might have a different kind of imbalance in the campaign you get. I'd be curious what the mayor thinks about that. But you would definitely have a very different presidential race.
Well, Mayor, what do you think from your perspective? Time to reconsider the Electoral College?
Not tonight, because the president's going to do something. So, no, I love it. I think it's terrific. No, seriously. I think that this is the system that has made us the greatest country on the face of the earth, and I think it works just fine. Now, Democrats have been on the other side of this deal when it came out in a different fashion. So I say that having been a supporter.
Well, you're talking about in 2000 when then Vice President Gore won the overall national vote, but he lost the Electoral College.
But he lost Florida by 537 votes. It was tough for the country. Country got through it just fine. I think our system works, and I believe that that the designers of this method were right. I think that folks in small states and in small cities and in rural areas and small towns would not get the appropriate amount of attention that they deserve if you went to a straight population formula.
All right, well, let's get back to the here and now. Tonight, we're talking about electoral votes. That's the reason we put the map up earlier, because whatever the national vote turns out to be, the popular vote, it's these states that we outlined: Florida, Virginia, Ohio, Wisconsin, Iowa, Colorado, and Nevada, where it's going to be decided.
Right, and just a quick point about the Electoral College, or as my friends back in Detroit call it, the College of Electricians, because you know they wonder they think electricians do is burn down houses. They can't understand any of this, but it gives small states power, because if we didn't have an Electoral College system, Rhode Island wouldn't count, Massachusetts may not count, New Hampshire, Wyoming, it would all be about California, New York, and Texas. So this thing, like the Senate, kind of balances it out a little bit, but it's an arcane system. And here's the one thing hopefully we don't get to tonight: that the Electoral College is not built for a close deal. There's a thing called a faithless elector. It's happened 158 times in American history when one of those electors doesn't do what they're supposed to do. So if this thing goes to a 269 tie, or in a tie, it goes to the House and Senate. The Senate picks the president, and the House, which would be John Boehner and the Republicans, pick the president. Country wouldn't like that. So it's not a system built for close elections, and it's possible, but unlikely, we could have a tie tonight.
Well, we have some, this is not official news. When we say we, quote, call a state, we've said earlier that Kentucky was going to go for Mitt Romney. Very clear it was. But now we're prepared to say, on the basis of everything we know, with the polls closed in Kentucky, we feel comfortable saying, yes, Kentucky, color it red, widely expected, but Mitt Romney carries Kentucky. Indiana is going to go to Romney, but we're not at the point where we, quote, call it.
We're going to do our call, which is pretty darn sure. And one little victory for history here, they're calling Kentucky, and they're right, because such a bench Republican state and presidential elections locally can be more Democratic. There's no exit poll there. So we're back to 1948 doing it without the science, and it's the first one they're calling, which is probably a negative vote in exit poll. But I would bet, I'd bet Matt's house that definitely Indiana will be Republican.
So under our PDS, pretty darn sure,
right,
Indiana's there. Yeah. So Kentucky and Indiana go to Mitt Romney, as was widely expected. Keep an eye on what still figures to be a close Senate race in Indiana, that while Mitt Romney is carrying Indiana, the Senate race where Senator Lugar was retired in the primary, complicated situation, but the Democrats have a chance to pick up a Senate seat Indiana, and we'll keep you posted. That's where we go.
Better than a chance, I think. Vigo County, we're back there looking at the Senate race, and Mourdock, who was favored, even though he had some inter-party trouble after that primary, an unfortunate debate comment, dropped in the polls. Some people have been arguing that because Indiana is one of the last states that have the old politics of a straight party line lever. Right. You can hit one lever and vote for the ticket. That might save them, might still. But in Vigo County, where we got the presidential race at 50-48, kind of matching up to a little worse than 2004, but Romney ahead, we got Mourdock at 37. And the Democrat, which would be a big pickup for them at 56, with 2/3 of the vote in.
So the translation of this is, if you're keeping count of the Senate races, the Democrats are hoping to pick up a Senate seat in Indiana on the basis of this tiny bellwether county. We're not saying you should bet the rent money on this, nothing approaching that now. Right. The indication is that while Indiana goes to Romney in the presidential race, the Senate race maybe, might, could be going the Democratic way.
The early numbers we have are bad for Republican chances of winning the Senate. Can't lock it, but he probably win a $20 bar bet. I'll up it to 100 an hour when we see Marion County, big Indianapolis, and some of the northern counties like St. Joe, we come in Elkhart. But right now in our little bellwether county, it's going for Joe Donnelly, and it's not small.
Yeah. Matt, besides the states we've mentioned, Florida, Virginia, Ohio, Wisconsin, Iowa, Colorado, and Nevada, we mentioned Pennsylvania. Mike was saying, yes, things may have moved toward Romney in Pennsylvania, but it'd be a great surprise if Romney carries Pennsylvania, and that would upset the electoral. What other states interest you as we go along in the evening saying, well, if it doesn't play out as we think it's going to, where else besides Pennsylvania might there be an upset?
Boy, I really think we're in that box. You know, there have been some eyes on Mike's home state of Michigan, but I don't see that breaking for Romney at all.
It'll get closer.
You know, I think people every few years, Republicans envy New Jersey, my home state, because it had been such a Republican bulwark for so long, and then it's been Democratic every year since '92. The Bush-Cheney forces tried a couple of times to make a run at it, didn't work. I think we're really down to those the swing states we mentioned. And I got to say, just go back to this electoral college thing. I've never seen a presidential race where the candidates just kept circling such a small number of states so many times. I mean, it's really the only time they got out of there was to raise money, and then they went right back in.
Mayor, you've been involved intimately with the Obama campaign.
Yes.
The last time you talked to President Obama, I won't ask you when that was, what was he most concerned about?
He was concerned about the amount of money that was going to be spent in super PACs. He felt very confident about winning the election, but he had a real concern about an unprecedented amount of money being spent against him. But it was really more than about him, in all honesty. He was just concerned, aside from his own election, and I won't be dishonest about his concern about that, but just what it would do to democracy if you had an unknown Democrat who was running, the amount of money that you could spend to define an unknown Democrat. He said that obviously he could handle it fine because he's the commander-in-chief and president of the United States, but that was the concern. And I hope I don't get thrown out of the limousine.
No, I don't think so.
Not if you beat 146,000 there in Fulton County.
Well, we're going to now in Vermont. It's my understanding that we're in a position to say, on the basis of everything we know with the polls closed in Vermont, that when all the votes are in and counted, that President Barack Obama will carry Vermont and its 3 electoral votes. As expected, I was saying, no surprise here, but 3 electoral votes go to Barack Obama, we think, when all the votes will be in and counted. Folks, we have a lot more to cover here, including we're going to talk about something the mayor raised about the concern about this being, when all the numbers are in, a $3 billion plus presidential campaign. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back to our election night coverage. What you're seeing, you've seen Boston and Chicago. This is where we have video of the rallies at the campaign headquarters. This is Chicago, and then we have the same thing in Boston. This is each of the campaigns getting ready to do whatever it is they're going to have to do, win or lose, or uncertain as the night goes along. At this point, for the candidates, and for their supporters, and for that matter, for the people who've worked very hard behind the scenes, the political professionals, these moments are sort of like a sauna, in that all they can do is sweat and wait now for the returns to come in. All the spin's over. The votes are in. Not everywhere. I want to remind people that in western parts of the country, some of the Midwestern parts of the country, the polls are still open. We certainly want to encourage you to vote. If you haven't voted, you can say, well, he's just going through the motions of saying that. I'm not. As long as there's time to get out there, if you haven't voted, you're qualified to vote, by all means do so. Now, we always like to hear what you're thinking. You can tweet us at hashtag DRR2012. That's hashtag DRR2012, or add your thoughts to the Dan Rather Report's Facebook page. Now we get back to our discussion. Mayor, first of all, I wanted to ask you, we've talked some, okay, the expectation was as we went into today that President Obama would carry Pennsylvania. Yeah. The Romney people thought they had a chance, thought they saw some movement. Do you know what President Obama's opinion of that was? Did he feel the Romney people were moving on him? Was that the reason you sent former President Bill Clinton in there at the last minute?
There were two things. One, we think that was because they didn't have a path. And because of the internals we've been seeing in Ohio, we really believe that they don't have a path in Ohio. So he had to go to Pennsylvania in our mind. That said, you have a very popular senator, Senator Casey, who's up by between 4 and 6 points. And everything that we're hearing from that campaign suggested it's running strong and that the president's going to be fine. But we are in an environment where we were not going to take anything for granted. So if the Governor Romney wanted to play in Pennsylvania, then we would put the big dog down in Pennsylvania and they would go at it. We believe that we will win Pennsylvania, but we're not going to take anything for granted, and it's essential that we win there, and we will.
Mike Murphy, you said you had some news out of Florida.
Well, not so much news as kind of where to look for the vote, because Florida's closed now like Ohio. And what counties the vote comes in, and we'll be getting some of our field people down there. We got the best in the business in Florida a little later. But if you want to go to the map, I can kind of walk you through kind of decoding Florida. And David Hill is a widely experienced guy in Florida, may chip in a little too. So let's go to our Florida political map. And as you can see, we got a little, it's probably early absentees and stuff being quickly done. It's not enough to know anything. But let's take a look. We've got a pretty good graphic here, and I'll risk embarrassment on the telestrator again. If we go to our graphic that shows some of the key counties. So here we go. Now, we've all heard a lot of what they call the I-4 corridor. And as you can see right there, from Tampa through Orlando up to what's called the Space Coast, that's where a lot of the swing voters in Florida really are. So we're going to be very interested here in that Tampa Bay media market, Hillsborough, Pasco, Hernando, also Pinellas County there, taking a look at it versus 2008, versus 2004. And the campaigns have done the same thing. For every precinct in those counties, they got a target number, how many votes they think they need. And today is about flushing those votes out, counting, and seeing if they catch it up. Now down in southeastern Florida, in Broward, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, that's the Democratic base. The story there is turnout. And that's what that's going to be about. How many votes can get to the polls, because they're definitely going to win those counties. And then finally, up north, and we kind of cut it off on our map because we tried to fit all of Florida here, but up here in Jacksonville and then across all the way the Panhandle is more Republican territory. In Duval County, Jacksonville, that's going to tell the Republican turnout story. Here's a couple of numbers. In 2004, John McCain came out of Duval County with 7,800 vote advantage. 4 years before that, George W. Bush came out of there with 61,000 votes. So we ought to see a net Mitt Romney number in 5 digits, not 4, and over 50,000 to really be in the hunt there. That's going to be a huge tell about what's going on in Florida, along with the swing counties, and then finally, I better turn that off, the Democrat turnout down there. Now, there are other parts that are important. Southwest Florida is more Republican, but really, that's where the radars are going to be on. A little later, we'll be talking to Sally Bradshaw, Jeb Bush's chief of staff and campaign manager, who's down there watching the vote now, and we'll get a report from her about what she thinks is happening in Florida.
Matt, asking you straight out your opinion. If Mitt Romney does not carry Florida and its 29 electoral votes, do you think he's going to carry the night?
I don't see how, Dan. I think it's very tough. I think you'd have to run the board on everything else, and that's hard to picture. And look, I think you're seeing the problem with that's been mentioned a lot in this campaign about the Republicans and especially Mitt Romney not doing better with Hispanic voters. You look at a lot of these states, and the bar for Democrats has gotten a lot easier because of the influx of the Hispanic population. You don't need to win as many of those contentious areas with the white voters if your Hispanic numbers rising and the Republicans really aren't getting a big piece of it.
Yeah. But you said you spent a lot of time in Florida campaigning for President Obama.
Just in Broward County on Saturday. And I mean, of course, Dade County is the real cash cow in terms of votes. But in Broward, Democrat performance is up 25% right now. So we're up 25% over 2008. And I've seen things I've never seen before. I mean, I saw people barbecuing while they were in line. There was somebody giving away half smokes. I actually had one.
Well, actually, that touches something, does it? If you have time in line, you have to stand in line so long to do your barbecue.
You're right. I mean, I raised that issue, Dan. I mean, I said very honestly, this 10-page ballot is a real problem of will. That's why folks have got to stay in line no matter what. But what I can tell you, not from any anecdotal, from what I saw and what I experienced, is people are happily waiting in massive lines that are turning into social events. And it's backed up by numbers. The Broward County performance is up 25 points. The absentee and early vote gap has been closed from 250,000 to about 60,000 to 40,000 gap. So my information is 2 days old.
Well, what about this theory? And I'm keeping in mind you're for President Obama, you're a Democratic mayor.
Did that come out?
That came out. Kind of like we put it right across the chest. But there's been some talk, and not all of it among just Democrats, that in various states, Florida being one of them, that the Republican administration of the state, having governor, state legislature, that they deliberately would complicate the ballot, make the ballot very, very long, hoping that it would be part of what's called voter suppression. Do you agree with that?
I do. And I think that when this election is over, one of the stories of this election really is going to be how the federal court decisions in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, and in Florida impacted this election. Because I think if you would have had the voter suppression or voter ID efforts allowed in Pennsylvania, allowed in Ohio, that you really could have impacted the the outcome. And when the court made the judgment to provide greater flexibility, certainly in Pennsylvania, where they had a very aggressive voter ID law, now folks can show up and vote in Pennsylvania. I think that's an untold story here that folks are going to be studying for some time.
Well, let's look at some keep in mind, early numbers out of Virginia. Having said to you, Florida and Virginia are virtually must-win states for Mitt Romney. Now, Virginia has 13 electoral votes, Florida has 29, as we mentioned to you earlier. Now, this is with no precincts reporting, so you say, well, how could they have anything? Some of it may be absentee ballots. So early on, you can't take much from this, but whatever you choose to take from it, and either side takes from it, what you have in Virginia is President Obama off to a very early, but keep in mind, this is a very sketchy set of returns here. By a fairly wide margin. Now, we don't know where those votes are coming from, Mike, unless you have some fresh information.
No, but we can talk about Virginia a little bit. You got to be very careful about the super early stuff because, you know, it's beyond the margin of error. It's like the margin of insanity. You just need more numbers. And we can't talk about the exit polling we have, but we know we got a barn burner of a race in Virginia right now, at least from the early indications. But let me take you through Virginia and where kind of the numbers are and what the campaigns are thinking about. The big Democrat numbers come from Northern Virginia. If you look up there, you can see Loudoun, which is kind of an exurb county. And you know, I'll give you a good idea of kind of how Loudoun County works. 4 years ago, President Obama won at 53 to 45, almost 54. Came out of there 11,000 votes ahead. George Bush 4 years ago won at 55, came out 13,000 votes ahead. That's a 24,000 vote swing. Mitt Romney better win Loudoun County. He won't have to roll up a big number like Bush will, but he's got to win Loudoun County. So if there's one county you want to watch to really kind of know where it's going to be Loudoun. Then you've got Arlington there. which is highly Democratic. That's about Democratic turnout. And that's what's changed in Virginia. Now, it used to be a Republican-based state, but that northern Virginia area between the growing Latino vote and professionals who are kind of linked to the D.C. spending economy.
Not kind of linked, they're linked.
Yeah, they're not always the most right wing of Republicans, so to speak. So Northern Virginia is a Democratic stronghold. Then you get to Richmond there in the middle, and you can see Henrico County, which is a big, important suburb of Richmond. That's in Eric Cantor's district. That's a big Republican stronghold. You want to see if the Republicans get their turnout there. And then down here, you've got a mix of all kinds of voters. You got African Americans who are probably going to turn out big for the president. You got suburban Republican voters who are going to turn out big for Romney. You got a military vote there. It's not a surprise. We remember during the debate all the argument about the Navy. There were radio ads running down there. Norfolk, huge shipyard, a lot of veterans. Can those needles be moved? You've got a big evangelical community in Virginia Beach. And then the real battleground where the Romney folks hope to overcome the growing demography of Northern Virginia is over here in the famous Fighting 9th Congressional District, which for a long time was held by a congressman, one of the last conservative Democrat congressmen, Boucher. That's coal country. And Romney's going to set records down there, even in Democratic precincts. That's his ace for Virginia. Is it enough, though, to fight off the exploding population up there? Two counties to watch to know what I think will really drive it. If I had to pick three, it would definitely be Loudoun County up there. James City County, which is down here, is a small but important swing county. We're going to be watching that one. It's a good predictor, kind of like Vigo, our little friend there in Indiana. And then finally, you've got to look at Prince William County, which casts almost 5% of the state. That's another county Obama won by 26,000 votes that Bush won 4 years ago by 8,000. That's a county Romney's got to win. Doesn't have to win by 8,000, he's got to win. And so that's what's going to happen up here. That battle for those exurbs, turnout in military down here, coal over here.
Matt Cooper, do you or do you not expect us to know how Virginia has gone anytime over the next hour and a half, 2 hours? Why did it be predicted to be so close it might be a while? What do you think?
I think it could be. And, you know, I think it's an amazing story of how this state became went from being so reliably Republican. You know, Bill Clinton didn't contest it, Al Gore didn't contest it, John Kerry didn't contest it, to being our most swingy of swing states. And it is the strength of this Obama coalition, affluent suburbanites, minority voters, Hispanics, losing big with the working class whites. Can he hold it? And I think that is going to be replicated in varying degrees in Ohio and Colorado and Nevada the rest of the night.
I don't think you can talk about Virginia without talking about Tim Kaine. I mean, the real reason that folks in the Obama campaign believe they're going to win is because we have a Senate candidate that is outperforming George Allen. And so you can argue about it, but his lead over the last 48 hours and 72 hours has been outside of the margin of error. So that has made certainly folks in the president's effort feel better, but Tim Kaine is a real difference maker.
Well, we'll talk about that Senate race, another Senate race we're watching very carefully, that one in Virginia. In sum, what you have here now, Kentucky, Romney, as expected. Indiana, Romney, as expected. Vermont, Obama, as expected. Hanging in the balance where the polls have already closed now, Florida and Virginia are the big ones. I want to thank Matt Cooper, one of the best reporters of this and any other time, for joining us here tonight. Matt, we know you're on deadline, so thanks a million for taking time to be here with us tonight. Really appreciate it. Now, just ahead, the biggest swing state of them all, supposedly, polls are about to close in Ohio. That's next, so don't go away.
Oh, okay, that's not enough.
Better on camera.
I don't know what you email me that supposed to send you. I'm not getting it.
I'm sorry, hold on just a second. I got 3 people talking to me at once. Hold on, Kim. Say again, please. Say. Hi, it's Dan Rather in Washington, D.C., and I'm speaking up for our friends in Columbus, Ohio. And the question is whether you hear us all right.
Hi, Dan. It's Jennifer. I hear you.
Oh, fine. I didn't see you on camera. Thank you very much. Look forward to being with you. Thanks a lot.
Likewise. Thank you.
Well, hello, America. It's 7:30 here on the East Coast, and that means polls have closed in 3 very different states. Everybody expects Governor Romney to carry West Virginia easily, which is interesting because it used to be as solid a Democratic state as it was anywhere in the Union. President Obama barely won North Carolina in 2008. It is still technically a swing state, but polls have shown Governor Romney with a slim lead. If President Obama does win North Carolina, it may very well mean that he's already had a big night. And then that brings us to the other state where the polls have just closed, to Ohio. As goes the Buckeye State, so likely goes the election. So why is Ohio so important? Well, we want to turn to an expert on that question, Jennifer Bruner, who she's experienced a lot with voting machines. She's very experienced in Ohio politics. Good to see you again. First of all, what do you know, what do you hear about the outcome in Ohio?
Well, Dan, I'm here at the Ohio Union at the Ohio State University, and there are still throngs of students in line waiting to vote. So we don't have any results yet, but clearly with the early voting, it's the largest early voting turnout that we've seen, which is likely to be favorable for Barack Obama.
Well, we know that Ohio in the past has had a reputation of having difficulties with elections and vote counts. Have you heard of any problems today, particularly with voting machines?
We've heard just of some spotty problems, but the kind of things that I'm hearing based on my experience is it may have been a calibration problem where if you don't calibrate it with a stylus instead of using your finger, it's a question of having to push a little bit below the touchscreen portion. But it's been very, very isolated. And as far as the machines go, there was one lawsuit that was filed by some election activists because they discovered that with one voting manufacturer's system, that rather than take the results from the server that tabulates the votes on a thumb drive to the box that the Secretary of State installs in each county board of elections that's connected to T1 lines, they created a software patch that would make that transmission electronic. And some folks have been very concerned about that. And the timing was unfortunate because anything that's done last minute like that, people do suspect, especially when the Secretary of State earlier has voted in favor of less time to vote, especially on weekends. So they start to worry about, well, maybe there's some kind of conspiracy, some kind of move to try to suppress the votes. But in this instance, a federal judge looked at the claims, basically debunked what the expert had said and said, you really don't have anything to back it up with, and said it's going to proceed as planned.
Well, now let's talk about the provisional ballots. There's been some fear of horror stories about these provisional ballots, that it might take many days, if not weeks, to count. Are you concerned about that? Is there any reason to be concerned?
Well, where we really have to be concerned with the provisional ballots is if it's a very close election. Because the provisional ballots in Ohio, the number has been high, unfortunately, because of the law that has so many different reasons based on voter identification to push people into provisional voting. And if the vote is very close, we know there'll be a fairly large number, probably several 100,000 out there, that's what it's been in the past, that we won't know the results of that particular vote tally until at least 10 days after the election, because during that 10-day period, which is in place for the military and overseas absentee votes to come in, it's also a period where someone whose ID wasn't complete enough may be able to take that ID into the Board of Elections to get their votes counted. And what you'll have then, if it's a really close election in Ohio, and I personally don't think it's going to be that close, will be lawyers from both sides working to pick off one ballot after another, because those are the ballots that can still be identified because they're in an envelope with the particular voter. Once that paper ballot comes in, the envelope is opened, the stub is torn off. We can never connect it with the voter again because of the laws for secret ballot. So for election lawyers who are looking for a way to try to litigate the results of an election, provisional ballots are a gold mine, but we hope that that's not what this becomes.
Thank you very much, Jennifer Brunner, former Secretary of State of Ohio and a friend of our broadcast. Appreciate you taking time to be with us tonight. Thanks a lot. We also want to welcome someone who knows not just a thing or two, but a lot about voting machines. Barbara Simons is a computer scientist and voting machine expert. She's the author of a new book called Broken Ballots, Will Your Vote Count? This is a topic that we all should care about. We've done some investigating on this, our program, our regular news program about it. There are several states that use electronic voting machines that have no paper backup, including states like Texas, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. Dr. Simons, thank you for being here.
Well, it's very nice to be here.
You have written that we're a great democracy with a third-rate voting system. What is so bad about our system?
About 25% of the people who will be voting in the polls today are going to vote on paperless voting machines where you can't do a recount. It's impossible to know if their votes were accurately recorded and tabulated.
How did we get to this point?
Well,
I thought Congress cleaned up the mess after the Florida debacle in 2000.
Well, that's what they thought they were doing. That's not exactly what happened. I think in many ways we're worse off today than we were in 2000, because even with the horrible mess in Florida, there were paper ballots that could be recounted. And now we have paperless voting machines, and there's even a move to internet voting, which is even worse because internet elections can be attacked by anyone from anywhere. And of course, there's nothing to be recounted.
Well, give us some examples where you think electronic voting machines have had glitches or malfunctions.
Oh, well, we're seeing that today in Virginia. I'm getting reports from all over the state about major problems with the machines in Virginia. There are screen freezes, there are machines failing, there are long lines because there are not enough machines. Election workers are not handing out emergency paper ballots the way they should. There are going to be people disenfranchised just because of these machines, forgetting all of the issues of security and recounts. It's a mess in Virginia, and what really bothers me is that you'll have a situation like a machine will freeze for half an hour, and then it'll come back up, and then people will continue voting on it. Now, what makes anybody think that the inside of the machine is working okay when the outside of the machine isn't working okay? I mean, there's just this absurd belief that the software is okay, and we have no proof.
Well, given what you said just now and earlier, Virginia could possibly be what Florida was in 2000 here in 2012, or is that too strong?
No, I think it's not too strong. That's been my worry and the worry of many of my colleagues now for quite a while. And in fact, we were trying very hard to get election officials in Virginia to make emergency paper ballots available throughout the state wherever these electronic voting machines are used. And by the way, all of the electronic voting machines in Virginia are paperless. Some of them are really old. They use two different types of machines that are so bad that they were decertified in Pennsylvania. Nobody else uses one of them, and only one county in Mississippi uses the other kind. And yet people are voting on these machines tonight. Virginia could be the deciding state. And we are in a situation where the national results could hinge on this one state, which is voting on dreadful machines, really unreliable.
Well, we spent some time in Roslyn, Virginia this morning documenting voters using the WinVote system.
Yes.
And we understand that about 3/4 of Virginia counties use systems like WinVote where there is no paper backup.
Right.
That's the kind of thing you're talking about.
Absolutely, and WinVote is one of the machines that was decertified in Pennsylvania.
Well, if it was decertified in Pennsylvania, why is it being used in Virginia?
I would like to know. I mean, that's a really good question. They should have been thrown into the garbage.
Well, Doctor, let me back off of what we sometimes call the wide shot.
Yeah.
We went through the terrible experience of the hanging chads and the mechanical punching devices in Florida.
Right.
So the manufacturers of these electronic voting machines in effect came and said, if you don't like that, do we have a deal for you? It's
Yep.
more expensive. We're going to sell you these
Yep.
electronic voting machines. Now, we know from our own investigation in our program that you can hack into some of these voting machines, which is a whole other issue. Right. Give me the case, if you can. Why don't we go back to paper ballots? You mark your paper ballot and drop the ballot into the box.
Well, I think there's another alternative, which is paper ballots that you mark, but you can feed it into an optical scan machine, so that's using the computer technology in a positive way, but then you have to check it. Because, as you know, computers can have software bugs, and they can have hidden malicious software. They can be hacked. So you can't trust any computer that is being used for voting. You have to check it. And so if we do this with the optical scan systems, which will speed up the process, we then have to have laws that mandate that we do a post-election ballot audit for every election. And the audit has to be done by hand. I mean, like in Virginia, if they're going to audit, they're going to feed the machines back, the ballots back into the same machines that could have screwed up to begin with. I mean, it makes no sense. There's no check. It's not an audit. It's not a recount. It's a retabulation. But it's not a recount. It doesn't prove anything.
I want to go to some videotape that we had from earlier in the day, which gives an example of some of this problem, if we can get up the tape. Now, Mike, I don't know if you've seen this or not, if you can help us along here. This is the, and listen, this is the voter is trying to vote for, he punches it, he took this picture with his cell phone, he punches the Barack Obama slot, and it lights up with Mitt Romney. This is the video at half speed. This happened inside a voting booth. Now, we've done our best to check the authenticity of this video just shown, and we think it is what it purports to be.
Well, where did it come from?
Pennsylvania.
But from a friend of yours on the internet or something? I have to admit, on election day, when people start saying the voting machines don't work, I become a huge cynic.
Well, I'm not a cynic, but
well, they don't work. They don't work for both parties. It's not a partisan issue.
So the votes we cast today are meaningless?
No, I'm just saying that we may not know the actual result of the election because we can't audit it.
But here's my problem with this. Why do 50 secretaries of state think you're frankly way out on a limb here?
That's not true. They don't.
All right, name a couple of bipartisan secretaries of states who think our voting machines are all broken and we can't hold an election today.
That's not what I said.
Well, that's my point.
No.
What I
said was that these
machines.
No. You're putting words into my mouth.
Okay, go ahead.
What I'm saying is that we are voting on machines that are unreliable, insecure, and cannot be checked. Even where we can check them, where we use machines with paper ballots, the optical scans I was suggesting, those are voting machines. And we can check them, and in some places we do.
But here's my point.
But we have to.
We have 50 secretaries of state we elect, and some states we appoint.
Right.
One of their primary jobs is to run elections, and some places have board of elections. But there are a lot of people in charge of this. If this was such a huge threat right now, why are we having an election? Are all the Secretary of States in some conspiracy of the status quo? Do they really believe their voting machines are untrustworthy? The truth is, any voting machine, if you have a malicious intent and you can isolate the voting machine, you can commit a crime on it. There are guys who used to put a screwdriver on an old Shooptronic 30 years ago.
Right.
But it's all a hypothetical.
No.
I think your argument is happening right now.
No, what I'm saying is that there are machine crashes right now. I'm not saying anyone is rigging the election right now. I've never said that. I will say that there are secretaries of state who share my concerns. For example, in Ohio, Secretary Bruner did.
Former Secretary
of State. Current Secretary of State of California, Bowen, does. In fact, California has a wonderful record on this. California is one of the best states in the country. Minnesota does. Minnesota has, there are a number of states, Florida's gotten rid of their paperless machines.
But
that was done by a Republican.
What's the worst state, you think, from your point of view?
Virginia.
So President Obama wins Virginia by 5,000 votes. Is it a legitimate win? That close? Or Mitt Romney?
We won't know.
Well, you're trying to prove a negative here. That's the problem.
No,
but anyway, we're going to disagree. I'm just not nearly out on a limb with that.
Well,
so are you, that all these machines won't work.
No, I didn't say that. I said there are machines that are failing right now. That's what I said. And that's not a hypothetical.
Excuse me, let me step into this now. This, by the way, has been interesting and revealing because debates and arguments like this are going to go on around the country, particularly if tonight turns out to be close about do we rely too much on electronic voting machines? What kind of voting machines? Do we need a paper trail, whether it be a paper ballot, some paper trail or not? But I thank you very much for coming in, because it's an issue that does need to be discussed, even in somewhat heated terms that we've had here. It needs to be discussed because it's real. It's happening. I do want to make one point that you raised a good one, and I tried to raise it myself. When we showed the video earlier of what a voter claimed happened inside a voting booth, and he took a picture, he punched the Obama button, but Romney came up. We did what we could to authenticate that. We can't completely, totally vouch for it. We believe it is what it's purported to be. Yes, ma'am.
So my understanding, and again, I can't vouch for the authentication either, but my understanding is that this particular voter was a technical person, and so when this happened, he decided to test, because the standard explanation for vote jumping, we call it, is that the machine has not been properly calibrated.
Right.
And that can go either way, and it has gone either way. So that's one thing that can happen.
What happened then? Did the voter go to the clerk and say, hey, I got a bum machine here, and they pull it out, or what happened then?
I don't know what happened then. What he did was he tested.
Yeah.
Okay, he tested what should have been done, and he tried to see how he could get a vote for Obama. And what he found was that the space on the machine, which allowed a vote for Obama, was much smaller space than for Romney. This could be a legitimate mistake. It could be rigging. I'm not saying it's either. I'm just saying that the reality is that it raises questions.
In fairness, we're here because we're lazy. We have the technology right now to generate a receipt. We have the technology, and we should do it. So this isn't a Democrat or Republican issue. Both parties deserve blame. I agree with the notion that we shouldn't litigate this tonight, but we have a will problem here. There is technology available right now that will allow you to vote electronically and get a receipt, much in the form that you do when you conduct an ATM transaction. That's really where we should.
Well, you don't want to take it, though, because that.
Oh, no, I understand. But my point is we can generate paper which can be audited in the event of an issue.
Right, but you want one of the things that the computer scientists have come to realize is it's not enough just to generate a receipt. It has to be something which is easily recounted. Yes. And the kind that you're talking about, like the gas station receipt, those are hard to recount because they tend to be a continuous roll and small font and so on. So that's why I've been saying paper ballot. That's easier. You can sort them like you sort money. It's easy to recount. And it's a way to convince the losers and the losers' supporters that they've lost. This is not a partisan issue. It should not be made a partisan issue.
I know we're wrapping this segment, but I've been running campaigns for 30 years. I've never hung a close, there's an error factor in elections. We had Chads, we've had lost boxes. I mean, this has been around elections for a hard time. There were some systemic problems in 2005 when the first electronic machines came. But electronic technology lands jet airplanes.
Yes.
The idea that just because it's electronic, these conspiracy theories, I'm
not
much
a
more.
Conspiracy theorist, but you can't compare these machines to jet airplanes. With airplanes, huge sums of money are spent on those machines. The software is examined by federal agencies line by line. We couldn't build electronic voting machines that could be afforded by election officials if we had the same kind of security for those machines that we have for airplanes.
Folks, I'm going to have to call time. Didn't mean to interrupt you there, but this is exactly what we wanted to do, was to raise the issue. And thank you so much for being with us here tonight. You've done so. We'd love to have you back sometime. Let's take a look at what's happening in Virginia, West Virginia, with 5 electoral votes. Although you see up on the screen 0 precincts reporting their absentee ballots in other ways, that we feel comfortable, along with others, saying West Virginia will, as expected, fall in the Mitt Romney category when all the votes are in and counted. So far, no real surprises in terms of states where there's been what we would classify a fairly definitive outcome. Kentucky, Indiana, now West Virginia going to Mitt Romney. All those were expected to go for him. Vermont, as expected, went for President Obama. The important point here now is that we're rolling toward the top of the hour. It's nearly 8 o'clock on the East Coast, 5 o'clock out west. Still plenty of time to vote if you're out there, but polls are closing quickly here in the East. We're going to take a quick break and be right back. Back from the museum, live election night coverage here on AXS Television from Washington, D.C. What we've been trying to do is bring you up to date on what we know, what we think we know, and what we don't know about the race so far. And quite frankly, we don't know enough now to know what the contours of this election night are going to be. It may be a while before we know. We are looking at states where the polls have closed, Florida and Virginia being, I would say, the two main ones, because keep in mind, it's our thesis that Florida, Virginia, Ohio, Iowa, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Colorado, where the race is going to be decided. Now, this is very, very early. Ohio, with 18 electoral votes. This was, when you see 0 precincts reporting, or for emphasis, that doesn't mean that some votes have not actually been counted. But on the very early returns, Mitt Romney 61% with just over 8,000 votes, Barack Obama 37% with about 5,000 votes. Now, if that should hold, and keep in mind how early this is, I won't say it's ridiculous to be talking about it, but you have to have it in context and perspective. We put it up mostly so you will know that we're watching the race. There's really not enough votes counted in to see any direction, but for what it is, good news for Mitt Romney. Let's have some context and perspective on Ohio.
Well, yes, I think we've got a good political region map on Ohio we could talk about, and then we have some exit polls that don't tell you candidate numbers in the horse race. They're incomplete, but they do give some hints for both Florida, Virginia, and Ohio. We can talk about that.
Let's talk about them.
So first, the Ohio political regions. This is worth a minute here. Ohio is a big, complicated state, so it's kind of natural. It's going to have such a big role here. You've got northeastern Ohio. You basically got what you could call the metal bending belt here, all the way across the top. You're going to have a lot of auto factories. Here in Toledo, a ton of Chrysler. You got Ford, you've got GM stuff, you've got big non-unionized Honda plants. So you've got, and we've heard a lot about the auto industry in this campaign. You can argue with suppliers, you're up to almost 12, 13% of the economy there, the employment directly affected. So that's what you have on the top, that kind of belt. Then you got central here. And wrong button on the telestrator, I apologize, another mistake. Right there, that county, right here, that's Franklin County, Columbus. That is going to be a big, big number tonight. Can President Obama pile up the numbers there like he did last time in Columbus? In the suburbs, Romney will do better. But right there, same with Cuyahoga County, Cleveland. Can President Obama run up the numbers there? Over here in the western part of the state, much more Republican. Down here, you got some coal influence. You got swing voters here. These are places Romney has to make it up. And the #1 county to watch, Cincinnati, Hamilton County. That's a county that has swung tremendously. If you look at the numbers on Hamilton, Obama carried it 53-46, about 30,000 vote edge coming out of that county. 4 years before, President Bush came out of that 23,000 votes ahead. Mitt Romney's got to carry that county to win Ohio. Now, here's what we do know about Ohio. If you think the voting machines may have a life of their own, exit polls that are not completed definitely do. They're not very reliable. But we have some reportable information. The second wave, and there are multiple waves during the day, is in.
Of exit polling.
Of exit polling in most of our key states. And this is an interesting finding. I have to put a big disclaimer on it. It is incredibly preliminary. But, excuse me, one of the key questions in this campaign is, who do you think is better to run the economy? The Obama campaign would prefer people think a tie or better for him. The Romney campaign has been trying to run up the score. Biggest issue, Romney's better in the economy. So the exit pollsters ask people in all 3 states, who do you trust more in the economy? Who do you think is going to do a better job? And in the early wave, big disclaimer, it's tied in Ohio, 49-48, 1 point advantage Romney. If you're looking at those numbers and you're for Romney, right now in Boston, when they see that exit, they're thinking, we wanted a bigger advantage there.
The Romney people wanted a bigger advantage.
That's our issue.
Maybe a portent of what's to come.
Yeah, it could be a ballot hint. In Florida, Romney's up in the early exits about 6 points on handling the economy. Shows he's probably doing a little better in Florida than he is in Ohio. But if you're the Romney campaign and your story is economic fixer, you want to win that metric 6, 7, 10 points. If that number holds, and we don't know if it will, the exit polls half-baked, and they've been wrong before, we all know. Right. But if that number holds, not the greatest news for Romney in Ohio.
What's your reaction to that, Mayor?
My reaction is that it's consistent. The exit poll information that I got during the break is that we're continuing to perform well. The only area that we've heard anything about, candidly, is North Carolina. I continue to feel very strongly about Florida because of the amount of time I spent there.
Therefore, do you think President Obama will pull it out?
Yes, I do. I
Now,
do.
Mike, I gather that on the basis, and again, folks, understand, we're not dealing with a lot of information here. We're not trying to kid you that we are, and neither is anybody else at this early stage. But Mike, if I read you correctly, you're saying, well, if you're in the Romney camp headquarters in Boston and you're seeing these fragments of information coming out of Florida, you might be mildly encouraged, encouraged.
The faulty exits we have now that are partially complete look better for Romney's issue set in Florida than they do in Ohio. Right. But we got to add, I mean, we haven't talked to people who are voting right now. The exits are incomplete, and we definitely need real precincts to come in, because that's how you take the exit theory and glue it to reality. But this is reportable information that's now in the exit poll world, and that's a teeny bit of a tell, very early, but it's a little bit of a tell.
We're headed toward 0 hour, 8 o'clock. A lot of new states will begin reporting results. It's just minutes away. We'll have the latest right after this.